The following video was produced by the Mem. Centre Mémoire Montréalais, for its online encyclopedia, Mémoire de Montréal. Directed by Stéphanie Lessard-Bérubé, in 2018. This is a meeting with Joaquina Pires. The video offers a portrait of this Montrealer, originally from Portugal, and her ongoing commitment to the integration of immigrants. In her apartment, Joaquina tells her story. At times, images show her walking through the places that have marked her in Montreal. Photos of her, at different stages of her life, also appear on the screen. Joaquina begins her story, sitting on a sofa in her living room. Her brown hair is tied back, and she wears glasses. Smiling, she is dressed in pants and a plum-colored woolen sweater. In front of her, a coffee table is covered with a white tablecloth embroidered with colorful flowers. A black porcelain swallow is placed on it.
My name is Joaquina Pires. I should say Joaquina Pires. But for diction purposes, it's been Pires, since I arrived in Quebec. In 1966, in Montreal, on March 17, at 10 at night, with my father, my mother and a few brothers. Since 3 of my brothers remained in Portugal. The first image I have is of entering an apartment building, which was not an ordinary building. It was a former synagogue on Rue de Luth. I was 10.5 years old and my younger brother was 6 years old. So my brother said, "You will have to go to school." And he said to me, "Here in Quebec, we have the possibility of going to French school or to English school." And I said, "I want to go to school in Molière's language." He said, "There is a school nearby." So I went to the Jean-Jacques Ollier school with my brother. At the time, it was in 1966, there were no measures yet for welcoming immigrants, and even less at the linguistic level. So, I went there and I found myself in a class where there were 30 students. And I was the only immigrant, the only recently arrived immigrant who did not speak French. During the summer, the school burned down. We had to go to the Charrier school. There are teachers you never forget. I will never forget Madame Dumais. I think she gave me some special attention. Later, we moved to Rue Bayry. It was a very francophone environment. If I still have a bit of a French accent today, it's because at the time, my brother bought a TV. There was a French series, which aired every day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was called Eternal Amour. Well, after that, I went to Le Plateau School. Then, I continued high school. And then I went to the first comprehensive school in the district. There, it was girls only, and we had to wear a uniform. I was on the student council. And we fought for the right to wear pants. This is where French started to be very important to me. Because I had extraordinary teachers. My parents, when I finished high school, they said to me, "Listen, you have studied enough. Now you have to go to work." But I said no, there's no way I'm going to work. I don't want to be a secretary, I want to go to university. So, that's why I've always worked. Because my parents also needed us to contribute to the household. From the age of 13, I always contributed money to help feed the family. And there is another aspect that marked me. It is that my brother, when we arrived, he was a member of the Portuguese Democratic Movement. It was an organization that was in opposition to the Portuguese political regime. And he took me to a meeting, and later, when I started hanging out a little more with the Portuguese community, we formed a theater troupe with other Portuguese people. But we did intervention theater. After high school, I went to Cégep Maisonneuve. Initially, I wanted to be a speech therapist because language, the question of language, interested me. But in the end, I ended up studying literature. This time it wasn't necessarily the literature or language classes that fascinated me, but the philosophy classes. I was a real bookworm. I read everything. Finally, I chose to study linguistics at Université de Montréal. So I did my master's schooling. I majored in sociolinguistics, and not in normative linguistics, if you like. I had two neighbors who lived on my street. One of them said to me, "Joaquina, I know that you work at the Hotel Dieu. We both teach French for companies, and they are looking to hire someone." I was hired to become a language instructor, and it was in Montreal East, at the oil refineries. At IBM downtown, at Armstrong Cork, which were English-speaking businesses. So I spent a lot of my time in college running from one place to another. Also, there was a colleague, who worked at the Office de la Langue Française, whose name was André Martin, like the journalist, and who had invited me to do 6 months of research on the question, why did the nurses fail the French test? And finally, the research allowed us to prove that there was too much cultural bias. And we managed to change the French tests thanks to this study. We developed specific courses for the work environment. We had a French course for nurses. The teaching was centered on work terminology, and a course for secretaries. I taught these two courses, and I had a job offer to work for the government. But at the same time, in the Portuguese community, there was an organization called the Centre Portugais de Promotion Social, which had submitted a popular education and literacy project to the Montreal School Board. They were looking for someone, so I opted to work in popular education and literacy for that organization. My father was illiterate and my mother could barely read and write. Then at some point, at Montreal City Hall, they opened the Accès Montreal offices, and they started thinking about how to integrate the dimension of cultural communities for immigrants working in public service. Then they opened a department that came to be called the Bureau Interculturel de Montréal. This is where I incorporated my life into municipal public service, where I remained for 28 years. But it was a dream job, because we had arrived at a time of change. We had been hired as liaison officers, then we quickly became advisors in intercultural relations. I find myself spending most of my time close to municipal interventions in everyday life, because that's where you can get things done. You are closer to the citizen. What I've done in my life is make small changes. So I would say, I'm an empathetic bridge. But Montreal allows me to be that way. It also allows me to be empathetic to the majority group, but also allows me to say, you can live here with your heritage, with the past you carry with you, or with what you are. And that's why I think I am truly a Montrealer.
After going to her kitchen, Joaquina Pires hangs her black porcelain swallow on the wall. The swallow is added to 4 other identical birds, around a frame representing a colored window. The video ends with an image of the entrance hall in Joaquina Pires' apartment. Her pair of boots are neatly stored there, and the light shines in through the glass door. Credits begin. Story, Joaquina Pires. Photos from Joaquina Pires' personal collection. Video, Stéphanie Lessard-Bérubé. Audio description by Ella Cuscio.